Well, to rake over the coals of last night's debate, I'm now joined by former senior strategist to Donald Trump, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Sir, thank you for your time. Let's just start with the obvious. What did you think of Trump's performance in the debate?
Well, as I tweeted out right after the debate, it was better than I expected for Kamala. She did her homework. She had her New York Times talking points squirreled away in her cranium. And President Trump allowed her to get under his skin. And of course, look, the bottom line is he wasn't debating her. He was debating her and the two moderators who are completely in the tank for the Democrat Party. So it was 3-1. But at the end of the day, look, let's be honest. Debates don't win elections unless it's, the 5 o'clock shadow for Nixon versus JFK. It doesn't change the price of petrol, doesn't change the price of a dozen eggs in America. These are for the wonks. These are for the political freaks. Very few Americans sat through that 90-minute long diatribe. And as a result, it doesn't really move the needle for either Kamala or the president. So in the next 55 days, there's still everything to play for.
Well, that sounds very aligned, your words there, with what we heard from Trump himself this morning, speaking on Fox and Friends, himself saying he just didn't feel inclined to do another debate because he said he felt like he came out on top last night. Is this just a way of basically trying to sidestep doing another discussion with Harris?
Well, it's not going to happen. I mean, it's a pointless discussion. There is absolutely no way that Kamala Harris will agree to another debate. It was hard enough to get her to agree to this one with all her ridiculous demands about having access to notes, and she wants live mic so she can talk over him in the break. There is no advantage to her. She thinks she's done amazingly, and as a result, it would be absolutely foolish of her to agree to another debate. So even if my former boss says yes, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. We're going to have J.D. Vance versus Tim Walz, the Veep candidates debate, and that's going to be it, I'm afraid.
What was working? So you're saying working against Trump last night with the moderators, in your view, from ABC. You feel like they were in the Democrat camp. That's your opinion. What else?
No, it's not an opinion. I mean, look at the absurd things they said. Muir said, and you told your followers to march to the Capitol on January the 6th. How strange, and God bless President Trump for pointing it out, that he left out the actual thing the president said. I was right there in the front row at the White House listening to the president on that cold January day, and he said, we will patriotically and peacefully march to the Capitol so our voices can be heard. So when the quote-unquote journalist leaves out the most important part, peacefully and patriotically, and when they fact-check President Trump on numerous occasions, and don't fact-check her once. I mean, one of the most egregious moments when she said, the policemen who were killed on January the 6th, no policemen were killed on January 6th. The only person who was murdered that day was Ashley Babbitt, a 14-year Air Force veteran, a 90-pound unarmed woman who was shot in the neck and killed by Lieutenant Michael Byrd. Thankfully, President Trump made that clear. But yeah, whether it's the fact-checking of him and not her, whether it's the Democrat talking points, this wasn't a debate. This was a show trial for Kamala and her buddies.
Do you feel like there were other points where Harris wasn't fact-checked, where you would like to have seen fact-checking?
Oh my gosh, utterly. I mean, think about the fact that she is now talking about building the wall, or she's saying that she's not going to ban fracking. I could show you clips now of interminable instances on the campaign trail as senator, as vice president designate, where she said, we will end fracking. I am coming after your assault rifles. And the fact that the commentator said, hang on a second, for the last 7 years, you've been talking about banning fracking, but now you're not only pro-fossil fuels, you want to build the wall. You are the border czarina, and you let more than 20 million illegals into America. But now you're stealing President Trump's platforms, whether it's building the wall or no tax on tips. so strange that the moderators didn't think to fact-check her on her multiple 180s.
Well, let's talk about missed opportunities by Trump then, because the moderators asked him whether he would like to see Ukraine win the war with Russia, and there wasn't really a response on that. Do you think that's a misstep?
No, because I agree with what he said. I mean, what partisan hackery. The moderators say, hey, don't you want Ukraine to win? What kind of a question is that? Well, are we taking sides in other wars? Is it not up to the Ukrainians to decide whether or not they want to win? President Trump, and I know this implicitly, and I've discussed it with him personally, he wants one thing and one thing alone, for the bloodshed to end. Whether it's the hundreds of thousands of Russians or whether it's the benighted Ukrainian civilians and military, he wants it to end. And I guarantee what he said last night is absolutely true. If God willing, and we do our part and he is reelected to the 47th presidency, then even before he's inaugurated, the fighting will end, because Vladimir Putin is afraid of my former boss. And I can tell you why. When we told him 300 special forces from Russia are running around Syria, he said, really? Kill them all. And within 4 hours, they were red mist. No American president has done that in the last, since the revolution of 1917. So the president's right. It's not about who's going to win. It's about stopping the unnecessary bloodshed.
Let's talk about one of the other major points of contention that has been played out time and time again in debates and interviews with Trump. And then recently he said about the loss of the 2020 US election. He'd said in a previous interview quite recently, well, yes, okay, I didn't win. And then saying again, well, actually, I was being sarcastic about that, insisting he won the US 2020 election. Do you think he's just going to stick to that narrative throughout? And should he?
Well, look, it's a fact. I mean, it's just a fact. And you don't need to talk about voting machines or pristine ballots or the unconstitutional decisions by governors who had no remit to do so, not to verify the signatures on mail-in ballots. If anyone believes that a senile, decrepit old white guy who campaigned from his basement got more votes than the first black president, I have a bridge to sell you in Connecticut. So we know what happened in 2020. Under the cover of COVID, they mailed out 81 million mail-in ballots unbidden, and that's how they perverted that election.
I mean, Mr. Gorka, it's a bold a statement. It's a bold line to stick to. I know it's something you've talked about a lot, and it is your firm belief. Others would say Biden won fair and square. And what you're suggesting there is that he's then not been a legitimate president for the last 4 years.
Well, look, let's just talk about, if you want to go into the minutiae of it, there are 16 counties in America that are deemed the bellwether counties. And if you win the majority of those, then you become the president. That's just demonstrated through polling for the last 50 years. President Trump won 15 out of the 16. How do you win 15 of the 16 and not win the presidency? Or how about this? Incumbent presidents never get more votes than they did the first time round when they win. Not only did he get more votes, he got almost 10 million more votes in 2020 than he did in 2016, the most votes in American history of any incumbent president. And we're supposed to believe that Joe Biden won, especially in those battleground states where the voting was mysteriously halted at 2 a.m. President Trump was winning at the time, and then 6 hours later when they recommenced the vote counting, oh, it flipped. Come on, let's live in the real world, please. I
mean, does this mean, when I hear arguments like that, for example, about a stolen election or about a justice system being, quote unquote, weaponized, Operation Lawfare, as Trump calls it, the various trials that he's been going through, it sounds like there is no faith or belief in American systems. Is that the case?
Well, you tell me. The current leader of the opposition is facing 700 years in prison. My former White House colleague, Steve Bannon, is in a federal penitentiary right now. So you tell me when a 73-year-old grandmother gets a custodial prison sentence for praying inside Congress on January the 6th, do you think we should have faith in our institutions when a grandmother goes to prison for praying?
So what is the hope? What's the solution? What's the suggestion for if you've completely lost faith in your judicial system, your justice system, in the election system? What next?
Win the election for President Trump on November the 5th and clean out the corrupt scum across the US government who think they get to use the most powerful organs of the state against innocent people for political purposes. That's the only hope.
Then what would be your first actions, your advice to Trump for first actions in office within those first weeks?
Oh, I don't need to give him advice. He knows exactly what he's going to do, from reinstituting the XL Keystone pipeline to banning the restriction of fracking in America to securing the border. Basically did everything we did when we were in the White House. I mean, we had the biggest economy. We had the securest border, the lowest unemployment. We crushed ISIS in a period of just 5 months. China was in its box. Iran was on its heels. Just do what we did back then and remember what it was like. Does anybody remember? For 4 years, there were no new wars in the world. And that was thanks to my boss, President Trump. He lives office in the senile bag of mush that is Biden with his moral turpitude.
I mean, in terms,
I've lost you. Can you see me?
Yes, I can see you. Still got you there,
Yeah.
Dr. Gorka.
So Biden becomes president, and Putin invades Ukraine. 1,200 Jews are slaughtered in the biggest loss of life since the Shoah, since the Holocaust. A resurgent China, rampant inflation. Just get President Trump back in office and then America can be great again.
I mean, do you think all of that, you've just mentioned the Ukraine war, the current situation that's going on in Gaza, all of that was somehow restrained by having Trump in office?
Well, isn't it weird? I mean, that when Obama's in office, Putin invades Crimea. When we're in office, nothing happens. We leave. And then Russia invades again, and Hamas does a jihad, the likes of which we haven't seen since 1948. So weird that when Democrats are in power, the world's in flames, and when President Trump is the commander-in-chief, nothing. I think that's all the evidence you need.
It's, again, a very bold assertion. I think some people would suggest...
Hang on. It's a statement of, were you alive, were you breathing or in a coma when President Trump was in the White House? Did we or did we not have no new wars?
You know, I was there. Yes, Dr. Gorka, I was there. But you do appreciate that there is more than just, you know, coincidence of whoever's in office. Of course, whoever holds the highest office in the land in the United States, the #1 economic superpower in the world, that is going to have an impact. Of course, I get that. Right. But do you appreciate that there are other factors at play, for example, with regards to the situation in Gaza, that maybe even precede President Trump?
But explain to me why it didn't happen when President Trump was in the White House, and I'll wait.
There was plenty that did and didn't happen, regardless of who is in office.
You're obfuscating. Why was the world stable when we were in the White House?
Their world wasn't completely stable when Trump was in the White House.
By comparison to genocide in the Middle East and land war in Europe, yeah, it was stable.
Look, in terms of what was happening in Putin's mind when he was deciding whether or not he was going to re-invade Ukraine at the time, I'm sure elements of who was in high office in Washington, D.C. gave him a sense of maybe, should I or shouldn't I? But I don't think that was the whole reason why he went back into Ukraine.
So explain this to me. Explain this to me. We informed President Trump that 300 Wagner mercenaries on the orders of Putin are running around Syria destabilizing the region. He responded, kill them all. And within 4 hours in the Battle of Kasham, all of those Russians were killed. Not even Reagan killed 300 Russians in one day. So do you know what Putin's response to that was? Do you know what he responded to us killing 300 Russian soldiers in one day?
Go on.
Nothing. He was so afraid of my boss, he didn't even hold a press conference to protest. I think that's significant, don't you?
Do you think there might be an element of putting too much importance of the impact that Donald Trump has had on all these global events? Or do you think it's he is the answer to it all?
Well, I can only go on empirical data. I don't know whether you're using a Ouija board or tarot cards.
Not Ouija board,
but
but
after he was inaugurated, what happened? We unleashed the American economy. We said, drill, baby, drill. We said, yes, XL Keystone Pipeline. We built the border wall. And within 18 months, we had the largest economy the world had ever seen. Not just, in American history, the largest economy the world had ever seen. And we, for the first time in our history, we were actually exporting energy. We had more sweet crude than we could actually use. So we weren't beholden to commies like Venezuela or OPEC. That's a function of who's in the White House. I'm a counterterrorism guy. That's what I did for 20 years. When we came into the White House, I thought that was the number one threat. I didn't realize it was China. When President Trump said, you know what, we're going to destroy ISIS and we're going to do it in 5 months, I thought, that's a pretty bold statement. But he did it. He got the lawyers out of the way. He told JSOC and the top tier 1 guys, kill them all. 5 months later, the physical caliphate of Daesh ceased to exist. That wasn't because of Obama or Biden or Harris. It was because the then commander-in-chief said, kill them all. That's why President Trump needs to be back in the White House.
Look, you talked there about the commies. I think you were referring to Venezuela. And I do want to ask you, while we've got you on a strategy point of view, that Trump's campaign has been referring throughout to Kamala Harris as being a communist or a Marxist. Elon Musk has followed suit, of course, online after endorsing Trump. Do you think that's a smart strategy?
It depends, which segment of the population you're talking to. And I think it's important to note that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Your viewers and listeners can check right now who Kamala Harris is and where she comes from and what she did in San Francisco. When you're pro-crime district attorney, when you say that, law-abiding citizens should not have access to the arms they need to protect themselves, that's what communists and fascists do. What's the first thing Stalin and Hitler did? Disarm the civilian population. And look at who her father is. This wasn't a pejorative headline. This is a real headline from the time. When her father was hired at Stanford University, they celebrated in the headline, Marxist economics professor hired to Stanford. That wasn't a pejorative. That was a celebration of a Marxist being hired by one of the most prestigious universities in the world. And that's her daddy. So if the shoe fits, wear it.
In terms of her supposedly being a radical leftist then, to the extent of being communist or Marxist, what do you then make of arguments we even hear from Trump himself that she's weak? So if she were to be weak in office or too centrist or too woolly, how does that also chime with the fact that she's somehow some sort of extremist?
Well, I don't get the question. You can have an ideology, but also be weak, right? Not all communists are brave and powerful. I mean, you can be a weak or strong Democrat. You can be a weak or strong Republican. You can be a weak or strong communist. You can have radical beliefs, but if you're a coward, if you're a wet noodle, then that makes you weak, and it makes the situation even worse because you hate America, but also nobody's afraid of you. So you can have an ideology and be weak at the same time.
Just finally, tell me why you think Donald Trump decided to enter what's called the spin room, but, the area post-debate where lots of people are milling around, there's lots of networking. Don't often see one of the candidates in there. Why do you think he decided to go in there last night?
To send a message to the fake news, legacy lying media to demonstrate that he's not afraid of them. That would be my supposition, but you'd have to ask him.
Maybe we will. Look, Dr. Sebastian Gorka, thank you very much for your time.
God bless. Thank you.